David W. Schnare joins us. He's a lawyer, George Mason University School of Law, Environmental Management, University of North Carolina, MS, Public Health, Environmental Science. I'm not going to go through it all. Bachelor's degree, chemistry, math. I mean, it just goes on and on. He is heading this group up and exposing something huge. So thank you for joining us, sir. We've only got about 3 minutes before we go to break. Just give us a basic boil down of what you're about to get into in the next hour.
Be happy to, and thanks so much, Alex. The Environmental Protection Agency has been conducting tests, human experiments on folks by piping diesel fumes straight out of a truck through a pipe. They mix it with a little air, and then it goes into a little chamber. We might just call that a gas chamber, because that's what they call it. It's a small room. People sit in there for 2 hours and breathe these fumes. The question is this allowed? Is EPA even authorized to do this? And if they were, did they do it properly? Well, they did not. These people didn't know the risks they're at. And the administrator of the EPA says that high exposures to these kinds of things don't just make you sick. She says they cause you to die earlier than you would. They cause death. So that's the problem we're seeing EPA doing, and that's the concern we have that we're trying to stop.
Just incredible. You know, they would tell troops, hey, we're going to test the flu on you and then nerve gas them. It's always, hey, be part of a test on air quality, and they pump in gas. Anybody knows pumping diesel into a room will kill people. We're about to go to break in a minute and a half, but tell people where this happened.
EPA has a facility on the campus of the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and they use that facility for a number of their air pollution tests. Now, I want to make it clear, this is not the kind of experimentation that EPA should be doing, but it might be the kind of experimentation the National Institutes of Health might do if they had informed the people that they did not properly do, and no one should have been doing it. We know in this country, experiments on humans must be very carefully controlled, and one thing you do not do is put them at this kind of risk.
Sick of the globalist eugenicist control freaks adding poison to your water and laughing as you get sick and die? Start purifying your water with ProPure. My friends, I've done a lot of research, and the best gravity filter out there, bar none, is ProPure. And it's available discounted at Infowars.com. Its filters are silver impregnated to prevent bacterial growth. There's no priming required. It's NSF 42 certified. Optional fluoride filters can reduce fluoride up to 95%. Easy to set up and use. Doesn't require electricity. Purify water from lakes, streams, ponds, and wells. This filter system leaves in beneficial minerals, which is key. Save money by not buying bottled water and avoid BPA that leaches from the plastic. ProPure is the best gravity-fed filter out there. It's what my family uses. Infowars.com already has the lowest price on ProPure. But if you add the promo code WATER at checkout, you get an additional 10% off at Infowars.com. You can also call to order 888-253-3139. How did you discover that the EPA was doing this? Because I know there's a whole other area to the story. And basically they were trying, because I've read over the lawsuit, but to rig things to then restrict cars, right? So, I mean, they're doing this testing so they can then demonize, what comes out of a tailpipe, period, right?
Well, one of the biggest problems is we have no idea why they're doing the testing. They claim that they're doing it to try to find out knowledge about air pollution. But in fact, this kind of testing is not authorized by the Congress. We learned about this, or I learned about it, when a colleague of mine and a fellow member of the American Tradition Institute, Steve Beloy, called me up and he said he had been following this issue for a very long time. And what was amazing to me, Alex, he talked about what was going on, and I just shook my head. I couldn't believe him, because I'd worked for EPA for 33 years. This was my life's work. I spent a lot of time trying to protect human health and the environment, to try to keep people safe and try to do the right thing. And what Steve was telling me just was unbelievable. And then I thought, well, it's all right. We do have protections. I'll look at the law. I'm sure there's a way that the law would allow some of this. And I did. I looked in greater depth than I'd ever looked at before with regard to human experimentation. And the bottom line is Steve was right. EPA was wrong. They're doing something that should never be done, should never have even started. And it's not around the edges. We're talking about taking human beings and exposing them directly to diesel exhaust coming directly out of a diesel truck. You won't believe the pictures, and they're available. They park a truck next to their building directly underneath an intake, a little pipe, and that pipe pipes this diesel exhaust, and not just particulate matter, but every other kind of toxic substance that's in that exhaust, including carbon monoxide, into the building. They mix it with air, and then they pipe it into this little bitty room where a subject sits for 2 hours and breathes it. And they get exposures that are above the level allowed by EPA for all the rest of us. And what is most disgusting is that EPA actually sought out subjects more likely to be harmed by this than the normal person.
Well, I mean, by the way, we heard about Nazis that would take the exhaust and put it back into a truck. They'd arrest people, put them in it, and then pipe it back in. I mean, this really does bring up Holocaust-type imagery.
Well, it does. And I will say that, you know, in normal scientific discussion, when anyone brings up Nazis, the discussion ends because people think you're over the edge. But the reality is, and EPA and the University of North Carolina, in their own statements, explain that the rules associated with human experimentation begin with an understanding that this is what the Nazis did and we won't do it again. Now, there's some additional backstory here, Alex, that I think maybe your listeners would be interested in. Steve Malloy's uncle was in a concentration camp, and because he wasn't able-bodied, his job was to go around the camp every morning and identify those people who were too sick to work. And those people whose names he put on a list were executed that day. Steve's terribly upset about this kind of thing. It's in his family to try to make amends for the terrible choice his uncle had, an uncle who was told that if he didn't pick these people, he would be killed.
Well, sure, that's right up the Nazi alley, is secret and toxic experimentation on humans, a.k.a. Joseph Mengele. And you're right, in the law, it states we don't want to do that. We'll be right back to break this down. This is a big story with the federal government doing this with people that didn't know what was happening to them.
Do you understand how dark it is? How far down the line we are? How late it is?
We're talking about some incredibly hardcore issues right now. If you just join us until the bottom of the hour, then I'm going to get into the incredible economic news I haven't properly gotten into yet, and an amazing story up at Infowars.com. You know you're a conspiracy theorist if, and we'll go over this list and more. We've also got a new Natural News article just out about Bain Capital helping cover up Monsanto activities. So, and again, they're financing Obama as well. It just shows how it's bipartisan evil, a total culture of corruption. Now, we're joined by Dr. David W. Here on the show today, and we're going to be discussing some things. We're going to be talking to David W. Schnare here in just a moment. And I'm here digging out the press release here that I have in the stack of Dr. Schnare. They have filed this lawsuit. If you're watching at prisonplanet.tv, you can see it. If not, just go to Infowars.com, and you can see the photos that they took of diesel trucks piping gas into the medical facility and not telling the people what was happening to them. And this is just absolutely amazing. The lawsuit is the American Tradition Institute Environmental Law Center versus United States Environmental Protection Agency and Lisa P. Jackson, administrator. And David joins us right now. Dr. Schnare, let me just read his bio before we get back to him, is a physical conservative, small government, free market environmentalist. He worked for 35 years at the EPA. He earned his Ph.D. in environmental management and his Master's of Science in Public Health from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and his J.D. cum laude from George Mason University School of Law. He is a member of the Bar of the United States Supreme Court, U.S. Court of Appeals for the 2nd and 4th Circuits, and the Supreme Court of Virginia. He is an adjunct professor at George Mason University School of Law. He serves as the director of the Center for Environmental Stewardship at the Thomas Jefferson Institute, Virginia's premier independent political public policy foundation, director of the Environmental Law Center of the American Tradition Institute, and director of the Free Market Environmental Law Clinic. That said, he's a real expert from the law, from the environment perspective. You see, he is really perfect to be able to expose what's happening here. So start over. You've got the floor. I'm going to shut up now, Dr. Schnare, and break down how big this story is. Again, ATI files suit to stop illegal EPA human medical experimentation. We have the photos, everything of this. It's just par for the course, but this stuff's still going on. This is what we think of as the old experimentation, and exactly where this is going. Because if they get away with this, and thank God you discovered it, you and your team, then who knows what else is going on and what's coming next, Dr. Schnare.
Well, Alex, let me just start out by saying that I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I am a skeptic because I'm a scientist. But this is not about some notion that there's an evil force at work. What there is let's put it this way, EPA has lost its way. EPA has lost its way in many different ways. And the EPA of today is not the EPA that I knew when I was there, and especially in the early days when we were trying to help clean up the environment and protect public health. There comes a point in time, however, when not enough management, not enough oversights being done. And that's what happened here. Indeed, the whole issue of even using data from someone else that came from human experimentation has been a controversial issue that under President Clinton, under President Bush, we didn't do. The agency didn't accept that data and didn't use it. And in time, people who had done this kind of experimentation, specifically folks who made chemicals, herbicides, and pesticides, said that they were willing to do the experiments and allow EPA to use that data to show that their stuff wasn't very dangerous. Well, indeed, they did that kind of work. Indeed, the agency looked at it and said that the work was done properly, the people were informed properly. But Congressman Waxman and Senator Boxer looked at this and said, this is nuts. You can't do this stuff. Wrote a lengthy report saying this is not appropriate. But it went to court, and the court said, look, EPA, if it doesn't want to use it, doesn't have to use it, but it has to make that decision through a regulatory action. And EPA hadn't regulated it. They're doing what they've been doing more recently, which is just by fiat deciding to do things without following complete processes. Well, one would have thought at that point that EPA would have gone ahead and written a regulation, but they didn't. They just ignored it. And that sent a message down the road. And some of these scientists who didn't have anything better to do, or who wanted to work in this area, or who had a brand new shiny facility that they could use to test human beings with, took it beyond the line. They imposed risks on these subjects without telling the people that this stuff can kill, that it can cause cancer, that it is, according to the administrator of the US EPA, the cause of 1/4 of all death in the United States. And so we look at this and we say, well, look, the science on PM 2.5 is a little bit hokey, but you don't fix it by putting human beings into a gas chamber and piping in diesel fumes just to find out how sick they'll get. That's not allowed.
Well, by the way, I've seen people arrested and put in Pier 57 during the RNC in 04. Then we saw it happen everywhere else where they will go and get an old facility, and then they come and run buses the whole time just to make everyone ill. I mean, to say, not conspiratorial. Doc, I know you're a smart guy. Do you know how many thousands of secret tests have been declassified, many of which were lethal against foster children, you name it? Just 6-7 years ago, New York Daily News showed where the government and other groups were contracting with CPS to deliver 7- and 8-year-old children to facilities to have pesticide tested on them until death. Now, I know you may not be aware of that. I can send it to you if you'd like. I mean, this is a long-term deal going on in this country. I mean, I'm sure you heard about black men and syphilis and things like that, injecting them or whatever and letting them have it for 50 years. But, I mean, this is all just the tip of the iceberg. And I would imagine that your investigation, you know, if it spreads out or you're able to get any traction with this, you're going to find there's other stuff going on.
Well, certainly the Tuskegee incident down at the Tuskegee Institute, where black men, African-American men, were exposed to syphilis and then were never treated, is a perfect example of where the U.S. government fell down on its responsibilities. And the sad part of that was that these men infected their wives, their children got infected, and even when penicillin was available and they could have been completely cured, that public health service activity went on. It went on until it was exposed. Once it was exposed, it was stopped immediately. And it was on the basis of that the laws we have today were written. But
yeah, well, those people were Joseph Mengelas and should have been executed so they wouldn't keep doing this stuff. I mean, my dad's professor, you know, the head of a major department at UT, because my dad was top of his class, called him and a few others aside and said, by the way, we're eugenicists. So, I mean, you've got a doctorate in science and things. You're a lawyer. I mean, you never ran into the eugenicists, the anti-human crowd, when you were at the EPA?
I have to say that my colleagues at EPA and my colleagues at the University of North Carolina, if they understood what was actually happening, would just abhor what was happening. And the only people who will defend this will be the scientists who say, oh, it's not really very risky, it's okay, it's just a minor inconvenience, you might get a little bit of problem with your asthma. And yet you've got the agency's administrator out there saying this stuff kills. The problem we have is a lack of supervision at the agency, a lack of honesty amongst these scientists, and that's where those problems always start.
Well, where is your lawsuit going then? What are you hoping to do with this?
Well, we're in the Eastern District of Virginia, and we are going to, and we're there because, among other reasons, it's called the rocket docket, Alex. It means your case goes forward very quickly. They adjudicate with speed, and we want this stopped. We intend to file, we filed a complaint, we intend to file a temporary restraining order motion by this Friday, which means a week from this Friday, we'll be in front of a judge saying we want this stopped immediately until we can sort out what's going on. Then the things that we're specifically asking for is that this kind of experimentation stop altogether, that this never happen again. Secondly, we want the University of North Carolina, whose medical institutional review board was responsible for reviewing the protocols and the informed consent materials, we don't want them to receive any more money from EPA.
Yeah, well, those bioethicists need to be fired. No kidding. So Doc, let me expand on this then. Look, the only moral human experimentation is if someone gives full consent. That's why the classic thing is scientists test stuff on themselves. Okay, that's your business. But, you know, the key here is what you're saying in the suit and what they admit. They were not telling these people what was happening. So I think they should be criminally charged when all this is vetted and totally proven. I mean, how about the Tuskegee people, and how about the folks that did this? How about some jail time so they don't? I mean, why does the scientific community always get away with this?
Well, I'll tell you, you're getting into something that's actually sort of personal to me, and it's an interesting story. You're here. Your listeners may want to
stay there. I want to hear this, Doc, on the other side and how we support what you're doing. Dr. Schnare is our guest, David W. Schnare, and we're going to give you the websites so you can go there and see it all for yourself. Alex Jones here with a message that could revolutionize health in this country. Going back about a year and a half ago, I began to learn about the incredible health effects of longevity products. Aaron Dykes lost 92 pounds. We're going to show you some before and afters. Aaron, break down what happened, your story.
I've worked really hard with diet and exercise to try to lose weight, but I just didn't get the results. It just didn't happen. Then I saw what you were doing with InfoWarsTeam.com. I wasn't even trying to lose weight, but I got it because I wanted to feel better energy. I wanted that nutrition. Didn't even understand how that could kickstart my own weight loss goals, but the products did that for me. I found myself suddenly losing weight, more energetic, wanting to exercise, wanting to eat the right foods.
And they don't even advertise it as weight loss. I want to challenge our radio listeners to go to InfoWarsTeam.com, sign up as a distributor, and get wholesale pricing discounts at InfoWarsTeam.com. Dr. Schnare, 35-year veteran of the EPA, joins us. He's also a lawyer, and he's suing over secret testing on people where they don't tell them what's happening. EPA sued in federal court over illegal human testing. That's from EPAHumanTesting.com. Junk Science is also carrying it. The story is starting to go big. We have our breakdown at Infowars.com, including photos. Okay, Doc, the break interrupted you there. I was saying it's time that people be prosecuted when they do Tuskegee type stuff. And you said, well, this is actually near and dear to my heart. Let me tell you a story. Start over.
Yeah, I'd like to share with you the fact that some of this testing is important and it's valuable. When I was a child, and my family had 4 kids in it, and we had some neighbors down the way, a young lady, but I'm not going to use her name on radio, but she was a dear friend. She was a little bit older than me and old as my oldest brother. She died in an iron lung from polio. So when my brother, who at age 6, was asked to partake in the first human experiments using the Salk vaccine, we jumped at it. He did. I'm very proud of him. And out of that came something that put a disease away, just stopped it almost dead in its tracks. That's the kind of human testing that makes sense, that's good, that's well done, and about which we can be proud. But the other kind of testing is wrong. And that, too, has some resonance in my family. My name's David because I was named after and to honor a relative, the last male who died before I was born, a guy by the name of David Steiner. He died in Buchenwald. He died 21 days after the camp was liberated because at that point he was so starved and so ill he couldn't recover. And when you look at that from a family perspective, you begin to say, you know, I need to do whatever I can to make sure that government does the right thing at the right time. And that's part of why I joined EPA. Now, I will say, I have many good friends at EPA, and I believe the agency, especially in its early days, was very, very important. We've solved a lot of our environmental problems, not every one, but almost all of them. And we've gotten to a point where we're now asking for more and more risk reduction for less and less benefit at higher and higher costs.
Well, sure, I just see it as a way to power grab and destroy private property rights while ignoring a lot of real environmental issues out there.
Well, there's a lot to your argument, and there are some that we cared very deeply about. We're looking at, and we have a lawsuit in Colorado now to stop their unconstitutional renewable energy standard because, in fact, the renewable energy standards make the air dirtier. It doesn't make it cleaner, and it costs more. But it's
how does shutting down our power plants that are clean, even the new ones, help when China's building new dirty ones? I mean, it's just insane. Austin is shutting down all its coal power plants. Our prices are literally exploding, and they go, but it's for the earth. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, that's another example of the whole climate change issue at which some people in positions of power want to say that the scientific debate's over, but the scientific debate is not over. And, of course, in Texas, you have the problem, and you had it last winter. I hope you don't have it again, where when the gas lines froze up and they couldn't get natural gas to the power plants, you were without energy.
That's right. They won't let us use the coal anymore, even though it's everywhere, and they've got systems that make it clean. Well, everybody has to get your story out. Blockbuster, EPA sued in federal court for conducting illegal human experiments. I know your organization is doing a lot of great work. Doc, I'd like to invite you back about the Colorado situation in the next few weeks and to give us an update on this. We've got a minute and a half before break. Anything else you'd like to add?
I'd just like to thank you for letting the issue get out. This is not a normal conspiracy kind of a thing. This is just plain facts that show EPA is out of control, and we'd like to stop that.
Well, Well, isn't this the kind of thing you'd try to stop when you were at the EPA, would be people sending in diesel gas on people? I mean, it's just crazy.
It is, and if I'd known about it then, I'd have raised a ruckus, the likes of which you'd never heard before.
What would happen if an employer was putting people in a place like this? I mean, they'd go to jail.
Well, it would be handled in the court system in a completely different way, but I assure you, they'd have to justify themselves, and a week from Friday, EPA is going to have to be in court explaining itself to a judge.
Well, we want to get an update from you, Doctor. Again, a scientist and a lawyer, quite a combination. Look forward to speaking to you again. JunkScience.com is one of the sites. There's a lot of other, people can read the PR Newswire story as well and see the photos at Infowars.com. Thank you so much for the time, sir.
Thank you, Alex. Pleasant to be with you.
Pleasure to be with you. Okay, there you go. Great organization there fighting against the out-of-control EPA. Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.